Southern Miss welcoming the big boys into the Hattiesburg Regional. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, we're going to talk Alabama baseball, one of the two big-time programs, along with Miami, coming into Hattiesburg. They're going to play each other while Southern Miss gets Columbia to get things going on Friday. Alabama is one of the top 16 teams in RPI that did not get a host seed. We're going to talk to Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama about that. We're going to talk about the pitching staff, who may be pitching against Miami, who may be pitching against Southern Miss, and they are loaded in the lineup. They have one of the preeminent players in the entire nation. And how did he get away from the University of Miami? And then we'll go over Alabama building their baseball program. Obviously, they are known for their football program, Roll Tide. Nate Oates is doing a great job with their basketball program. They did take a little hit with their baseball program a couple of years ago. We'll talk about that. He is Jimmy Stein. He's from Locked On Bama. We're doing a little crossover episode, and he is Locked On Sunbelt. All right, welcome to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. We'll try that again. Lights come on. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Happy and thrilled to bring on Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama. We're going to talk a little Hattiesburg Regional. You got Southern Miss, you got Alabama, you got Miami. That sounds like a pretty good football round robin there. And of course, you have the Columbia Lions. But let's talk some Alabama baseball. Jimmy, let's recap the season. Some people picking that Alabama could actually win this regional. How close did the Tide fans and program think that they were to actually hosting?
Yeah, there's a lot of upset or frustrated Alabama fans over not hosting this series, and in the sense that of the top 16 in the RPI, Alabama is the only top 16 team not to host. So they had a slightly higher RPI than Southern Miss and had beaten Southern Miss head-to-head during the season. So that's Alabama's case for maybe they should host. But, Dave, here's the thing. All of your complaints about that are pretty hollow unless you win. You know, Alabama being sent to the Hattiesburg Regional means you probably shouldn't talk so much. You should just go win the regional, because if you don't win the regional in Hattiesburg, what right do you have to complain? You should have been hosting over Southern Miss anyway. So there was some frustration, but I don't think it's been noisy, and I don't think Alabama didn't play that great down the stretch. They played very poorly in their final game. I think there's more of a bad taste over that. So while there has been complaining and frustration, it hasn't been that big of a thing.
Now, as somebody, who spent a lot of time in Louisiana following the Cajuns and LSU and got to love some college baseball, and then moved to Alabama, where I worked in Mobile, South Alabama, had a nice run, did a number on Florida. In fact, Miami actually won that regional because South Alabama knocked the Gators out. But that was the time that all of a sudden Auburn baseball started doing better, and Alabama baseball started doing better. And all of a sudden people started noticing Alabama baseball. Why don't you recap this season and what this season has been like overall for the Tide?
Sure. Before the season started, actually the league coaches or league media, Alabama was picked to finish 13th out of the 16 teams. So there wasn't super high expectations, but those close to the program that knew the program well and the coaches on the staff, they were very optimistic the whole time. They knew they had a good team. They made the NCAA tournament a year ago, lost early. They were good enough to make the tournament, but not really good enough to advance. But they had significant injury issues with the pitching staff a year ago. They knew they were getting some of those pitchers back. They knew they were bringing in some new arms, some new bats from the portal. So the closer to the program you got, the more optimism there was that this team might actually be pretty good. And then they get off to a pretty amazing, I think it was 16-0 or 17-0 to start the season, and playing a fairly tough schedule, not super tough, but fairly tough for the non-conference portion of the schedule. That 17-game or so win streak was highlighted by falling behind Ohio State 9-0 to come back to win 10-9 with the home run in the last at bat. They had a great start to the season, but then here comes the SEC games, right? They start the SEC season with a sweep of Texas A&M in College Station. They were the preseason #1 team in the country. Ended up not having the season they thought they would have. But there has been some really nice moments for Alabama in the SEC season. Sweeping A&M, sweeping Missouri. They beat Georgia 2 out of 3 at a time when Georgia was a top 5 team RPI wise. They also had their disappointments during the SEC season. What they did in Hoover, in their final game in Hoover, which left kind of a bad taste in everyone's mouth. They gave up 15 runs to Tennessee to lose 15-10 in the second round of the SEC tournament in Hoover. That kind of highlighted this Alabama team's issues, Dave, and that's there hasn't been a great depth of arms, not at the elite level it takes to win in the SEC. Ironically, they have maybe a projected first-round pick as one starter, and their closer's fantastic. School record saves, Carson Ozmer, who was a transfer from the Ivy League. So one starter's super elite. The closer is elite. Everything else is pretty average SEC-wise. Now, I don't know if you'd say they're average nationally, but the SEC is just so brutally tough. They'll expose anything that's not great. But that's Alabama's question mark, Dave, is pitching after the ace, Riley Quick, and before you get to the closer, Carson Ozmer. That's the question. Does Alabama have the depth of arms it's going to take to win a regional in Hattiesburg where 3 of the 4 teams are very good? Southern Miss is obviously a pretty elite baseball team, or they wouldn't be hosting. Miami, Florida, pretty solid for a 3 seed. Certainly have a lot of tradition there. They'll have some good players. Does Alabama have the depth of arms it's going to take? Because they're going to score some runs, and they'll look good on the mound when Riley Quick's out there and when Carson Ozmer's out there. Everything else is kind of a question mark.
I want to hear what the preseason preconceived notions were of Carson Ozmer, because I'll tell you what I would have thought from an Ivy League guy coming to pitch to the SEC. You could be lights out in the Ivy League, and obviously we're going to be, we'll go stereotype. He's obviously going to be pretty bright because he's coming from the Ivy League. That's
true.
But can he hang in the SEC going up against the Georgias and the Floridas and the Auburns, right? Because there's going to be the coaches might be thinking it, but they're probably also in the back of their minds, we hope he can. The fans are going to be like, we'll see it when we believe it. What was the preconceived notions? Yeah. Obviously, he exceeded all expectations because, he's first team all SEC.
That's right. Very fair questions about how it would translate. One thing that's really odd about him, he's been a record-setting closer at Alabama. I think one would assume, without ever seeing him pitch, he must be a really big kid that gets it up to 97, 98. No. Carson Ozmer is all about location and movement. It's almost, I'm not comparing him to Greg Maddux, that's silly, but it's almost like watching Maddux. It's all about location, movement. He must be very difficult to prepare for, because I don't think in the SEC those guys see a lot of arms like that. They see a lot of power arms and a lot of power pitchers, especially in the closer's role. But Carson Ozmer is very good at changing speeds and location and throwing things other than a four-seam fastball. Now, he throws it well enough to get it by people. If you sit on the changeup or something off speed, he'll throw it by you. He's just been very effective, like you said, said the stereo. He is a bright guy. You can tell by watching him pitch, he's a bright guy. But I would guess that even Alabama's coaching staff has been a little surprised by how effective he's been. Very consistent. Carson Ozmer was very good in the preseason and very good all through the SEC games.
Let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Locked On Bama's Jimmy Stein. Whereas Bama does not have that depth in pitching, they have a ferocious lineup, and it is led by their shortstop, Justin LeBron, who may be one of the preeminent players in the entire nation. We'll do that after I tell you about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel? It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's continue our conversation with the host of Lockdown Bama, Jimmy Stein, tells us about what an impressive lineup this Alabama Crimson Tide team has, led by their shortstop, Justin LeBron. Talking to Jimmy Stein from Lockdown Bama. It is Lockdown Sunbelt, your teams every day. We're previewing the Hattiesburg Regional, Southern Miss hosting Columbia, Alabama, and Miami. So it appears Alabama, looking at the statistics, you're telling me they don't have the depth of arms. They got a good starter. They got a good closer, but they have a ton of really good bats.
Yes, they can really score runs. They've been a little streaky with it, but overall they do score a lot of runs. A real treat for people in Hattiesburg. Of course, they played Alabama earlier this season once. Alabama shortstop Justin LeBron, he's the show. I mean, you can really sit here and have a discussion as to whether Justin LeBron might not be the most talented baseball player to ever play at Alabama. And that's saying a lot. When Alabama doesn't have the history of a Mississippi State or an LSU, but they do have a solid baseball history. And to say that, I realize what I'm saying. But Justin LeBron is, when you look ahead to mocks in June of 2026, because he won't be draft eligible until next June. When you look at those mocks, he's consistently in everyone's top 10. I do think it's conceivable he could be the first position player drafted, or certainly the first college position player drafted, which is pretty amazing. He's fun to watch. He's a show. He's great defensively. He's a shortstop that hits with power, was leading the nation in RBIs for a big chunk of the year. But I think that Major League scouts will almost view him as a defense-first guy. He's got a slick glove, a great arm, good kid. He's from South Florida. He was a highly recruited, highly regarded guy, but they didn't think he'd be this good. I mean, he's a guy that really blossomed at Alabama because he plays like a high first-round pick, and he wasn't a highly drafted kid out of high school. But Justin LeBron is a treat. He is a candidate to win the Golden Spikes Award. I doubt that happens for him this year. He could be the preseason favorite to win it going into his junior season, which will be next year. But Justin LeBron's the show for Alabama with the bat, and he plays shortstop and bats second.
Well, he's got 18 home runs, 72 runs batted in. I think he's stolen 17 out of 18 bags, so he's got the power and the speed. Because you say he's from South Florida, and he blossomed into the player that he is, because the next obvious question would be, how did he end up at Alabama? There's a lot of schools in between South Florida and Tuscaloosa that, would have liked to have Justin LeBron at their place of play.
That's why I think it's a little bit of a surprise that he's this good. They knew when they signed him in Alabama, from what I've heard from the staff, they knew he was a good player and even had a chance to be a player as a freshman. I don't think they expected him to walk in and sort of be the best player on the team as a true freshman. That was a year ago, and he's been even better in year two. I think he's just one of these guys that was, the 4-star that should have been, in retrospect, a 5-star. But kids develop it at different times. Like you were just going over the offensive numbers, Dave. He's great with the glove. I mean, that's an asset for him. He is a legitimate, high-quality shortstop. And this is why he's got such a bright future at that next level, because he really checks so many boxes. He's not the only good hitter that Alabama has, but he is the show. Richie Bonomolo, who's a transfer guy, he's in center field. He's originally from the Bronx, kind of plays that way. He's got kind of that New York City swagger a little bit to his game. Kade Snell is another quality hitter. He usually hits third in the lineup. He's had a really good year. Will Hodo, who plays first base. very good with the timely power. He's the game-winning home run guy. Seems like when his home runs, he's hit several, but they've all meant something. I mean, some guys hit 18 home runs, and they're all when you're up 10-0 or down 10-0. Seems like Hodo's home runs come when the game's tight and it's late. I mean, he's a good clutch power hitter. So Alabama has several good bats, and I think Alabama's fans and team are optimistic about going to Hattiesburg and scoring runs. It's that 15-10 loss to Tennessee that they're carrying with them, Dave. I think the worry is they're going to go down there and get into some 15-10 games in Hattiesburg, and that's just not a recipe for success.
Well, that'll be tough. Southern Miss has the bats, but they got the pitching. I would presume Southern Miss thinks if they're going to win this thing, they're going to do it with pitching. They have bats. They got plenty of bats, but they have their first two guys are really good pitchers. I would say, I don't know if it's a coincidence or ironic or neither. Sometimes I get confused with that. Just to let you know, just did the quick Google search, Jimmy. Justin LeBron is from Miramar, Florida. That's exactly 25.1 miles away from Coral Gables, which means it's 3.5 hours from the campus if you're in traffic in South Florida. Did they swing and miss on him? Did they not go after him? I mean, we're playing Alabama versus Miami.
Honestly, don't know.
Get out of town.
Honestly, don't know. But from what little I know, I would guess that they passed on him because they had another guy. Okay. I would guess. This wasn't, when Justin LeBron was recruited, there's obviously some level of NIL involved. At Alabama baseball, that wouldn't have been a massive number, but I'm sure that was a factor to an extent. Interestingly enough, Alabama's third baseman, Jason Torres, is a Miami Hurricane transfer. So Alabama's going to have an extra scouting report from someone that was on the team just a year ago. He's the starting third baseman. So I don't know why Justin LeBron ended up at Alabama as opposed to the South Florida schools. And again, when you watch him play, your first thought isn't, how did Miami let him get away? Your first thought is, why wasn't he a first-round pick when he was in the 12th grade?
Sure. Yeah, he could have been drafted, right? Yep. Very easily.
Because he looks like that guy when you're watching him play. You're like, gosh, what on earth was ever questioned about him? He was a little wiry, but heck, that changes for most kids as they get older.
Obviously, if he's playing in South Florida, the scouts are all over there.
Yeah.
They're not. He's not in some podunk little town that they missed him.
No.
He's being, and if he's going to Alabama, he's being heavily recruited by other schools. All right. So let's talk a little pitching.
Sure.
Who's pitching for Southern Miss as of this recording is up in the air. JB Middleton is their ace. They have Matt Adams. They go usually so far. Christian Ostrander has stayed with JB Middleton. That's more about pitching first. He pitched against Troy on Thursday a couple weekends ago, and then went on Wednesday in the first game of the Sun Belt Conference tournament. He's going to get extra rest either way, whether he pitches on Friday. But that's against Columbia. It's not my decision, but I would wait and have JB Middleton pitch against the winner of Alabama and Miami, and have Matt Adams pitch against Columbia, and see if we can do it that way if you're Southern Miss. What way is Alabama going to go? They don't have that luxury because they have to get past the Hurricanes.
Correct.
And obviously a tough ACC foe, although they have to be one of the last four in because they had an RPI of 40, and you have a bunch of Troy Trojan fans that are not happy that Miami got in, but that's a different podcast. That was yesterday's podcast. Alabama doesn't have that luxury of having to wait to have their best pitcher go. So who's going to be going for Alabama, you think, first up?
Yeah, it hasn't been officially announced, but I've heard Rob Vaughn talk about this. I'll be shocked if it's not Riley Quick. Riley Quick is Alabama's best starter. He's been fantastic. He is a guy that might go in the first round of the draft this June. If not, he's sort of a second round lock. Big kid, big arm, high school offensive lineman that lost weight but retained great power. He can get it up in the 90s and throw that hard for 6, 7, 8 innings. Riley Quick's fantastic. What's kind of strange, Dave, about Alabama's rotation is Riley Quick has clearly been Alabama's best starter, but has never been the Friday night guy. They started out with a guy named Zane Adams. He was the Friday night guy to start the season. they've switched to a guy named Tyler Fay, who was a bullpen guy, probably their best arm other than Ozmer in the bullpen, but he was a long reliever. He'd come out of the bullpen and be capable of pitching 3-4 innings. And after a while, it became clear that he was really the most effective guy on the roster other than Riley Quick, who could pitch multiple innings. So he got bumped from, you hardly ever see this, middle relief, not a midweek starter. He got bumped from middle relief to Friday night starter.
That's a tough spot.
Yeah, you don't see that happen too often.
It's not fair to him.
But he's been good. As a matter of fact, he probably pitched the best game he's pitched so far as a starter in Hoover, playing against Missouri, who's had a miserably bad season.
Right.
They're still in the SEC, but they've been bad. But Tyler Fay, I think, gave up 1 run in 7 innings pitched against Missouri. He was really good. I think Tyler Fay is likely to go Saturday for Alabama. Friday at 2 o'clock. I'm expecting to see Riley Quick versus Miami. Look, I know that Alabama would say much similar to your argument about Middleton and Southern Miss's situation. Riley Quick is who Alabama wants to put out there in the biggest games, but they got to take care of business against Miami. I think if Alabama was facing the Ivy League type team on Friday, they would go with Tyler Fay, who's their Friday night guy anyway. He would probably pitch in that situation so they could save Riley Quick for potentially facing the home team Southern Miss on Saturday. But I think Miami's probably too good for that. I think they're going to pitch Riley Quick Friday and go with Tyler Fay Saturday, who is their Friday night pitcher. That would save Zane Adams to start the 3rd game, whether that's Saturday afternoon or sometime on Sunday.
We're talking to Jimmy Stein, Locked On Bama. It is Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. So is it a bats thing that's going to carry him? Like you're saying, they don't have the pitching depth. Whereas I think if Southern Miss, Southern Miss can slug their way, but it's going to be their pitching that leads them. J.B. Middleton and Matt Adams and Colby Allen at the back of the bullpen, they will win this or not. If their pitching doesn't show up, they can hit a little bit, but Southern Miss has the pitching to win, and that's how they will win. If they get into a bunch of slugfests, I'm not sure that's going to be the recipe for success for Southern Miss. They're going to hold the other team to a lot less runs. They're looking for those 5-3 victories, not 15-10 ball games. That's not going to happen if Southern Miss is going to win, I think.
Right. I think Alabama's recipe is, when Riley Quick pitches on Friday against Miami, that's a game they could conceivably win 3-2 or 2-1. They generally won't have to score a lot of runs when Riley Quick is pitching generally. But once Saturday runs around against Southern Miss or whoever they're playing over the weekend, they're going to have to score some runs to win. I don't think Tyler Fay or Zane Adams or that Alabama bullpen will shut down Southern Miss Columbia or a rematch with Miami. I think there will be some runs scored, and Alabama's going to have to score themselves. But that's the strength of this team, is the offense. It's there most days. And again, this Alabama team's been very, very good. RPI is 13. The schedule strength is insane, as it is for most SEC teams. They've beaten most of these good SEC teams at least once. So they're a talented team with the bats. And again, Riley Quick's outstanding. The closer, Carson Ozmer's outstanding, as we've gone over. The rest of the arms are more of a question mark, but they're also occasionally very good. Alabama feels like, I think, that they can go to this regional and that they have the team that can go into Hattiesburg and win this regional. I'm sure they feel confident that they can. It just won't ever be easy playing on the road in these type environments with this much on the line.
Well, yeah, it's going to be a fun place to play. Let's take one more time out. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation with Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama and talk about the Alabama baseball program, where it has some impressive history, and where it is heading. Obviously, it does get overshadowed by the football program. We'll do that after I thank everybody. Wow, we continue to grow. We are so close to 2,000 subscribers. And let me just tell you some inside baseball stuff. When usually I post my podcast on the X, on the Twitter, you get 100 views. It's pretty good. You guys can see it. It's not like it's analytics on the back end, right? I'm getting 1,000, 2,000 views. I really appreciate that. It'd be nice if some more came over to the YouTube and to subscribe, but I appreciate it all, right? And I get the back and forth, and sometimes you can't tell, we don't have the sarcastic font, and so I do appreciate the back and forth, mostly from Southern Miss fans. But appreciate everybody that's coming in. We're going to get to the Miami teams, and we're going to get to the Gators as well. I'll preview the Coastal Carolina, the Conway Regional later on in the week. So appreciate everybody that's tuning in. We're going to have one heck of a weekend. That is for sure. So thank you so much. We continue to grow by leaps and bounds, and it's all because of you. Now, back to Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's wrap up our conversation with Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama. Pretty impressive history that I was not aware of. Alabama baseball obviously gets overshadowed by the football program, the basketball program, Final Four appearance by Nate Oates, even the softball program, pretty good. Baseball program has been growing, did hit a little bit of a speed bump a few years ago. We'll talk about that. He is Jimmy Stein from Locked On Bama doing a crossover episode with Locked On Sunbelt. We're talking to Jimmy Stein, Locked On Bama. It is Locked On Sunbelt, little crossover edition, your teams every day. All right, tell us about Alabama's baseball program. Obviously, the afterthought, it's football, football, football. Nate Oates has, lifted Alabama basketball to new heights, right? Final Four appearances, number one rankings, prolific three-point shooting. And baseball, softball has been a prominent program going to Oklahoma City. And it feels like baseball has, let's say, benefited from the SEC network and maybe the extra cash from the SEC network. I kind of think that the sport that has benefited the most from the SEC network has been the ladies' sports, softball and gymnastics. But as far as Alabama goes, it has been baseball because that's been an afterthought, just because the way it is in Alabama. So tell us about the program because it's been pretty good for the better part of at least a decade. Obviously, like you said, it hasn't been Mississippi State. It hasn't been LSU, right? Those are two legendary Southern programs, or Miami for that fact of the matter back in the day. And then we've had, Florida just won a national championship. How has Alabama built itself up over the last decade?
Well, there's been stretches through Alabama's history where they've been very good, nationally elite, even several stretches. They were very good in the mid 90s behind Jim Wells. They were as Alabama and LSU were the best two programs in the SEC for pretty much an extended period of time. Alabama playing LSU in the College World Series for the national championship one year, for instance, fell a little short to LSU there. But Alabama's had time, so they've been very good. But after Jim Wells,
tough break being the second best team in LSU because that's like being the second best team in the country.
Exactly,
but you're behind the best team in the country.
That's exactly right. The one team that they struggle with, you end up playing them in Omaha in the championship. But Alabama's had some national championship worthy type teams. They lost to Texas and Roger Clemens in 1983. They played Roger Clemens in Texas in the final in '83 in Omaha. So they've been very good at times. But since Jim Wells retired, it's been a struggle for them until most recent times. This is the first time, I believe, in 14 years they've made the NCAA tournament just 3 years in a row. Now, they're hoping that this hire of Rob Vaughn, who's in year 2, they're hoping that this Rob Vaughn hire, who came from Maryland, where he was the head coach, they're hoping that this is a Nate Oates type hire for Alabama baseball, that Rob Vaughn has sort of the makeup of a Nate Oates. He's won right away. Now, he did inherit a pretty decent situation, a team that had just gone to the NCAA tournament and made it to a super regional. That's what he inherited. So he inherited a good program. Like you said, Dave, it's so true. The SEC's money situation is just better than everyone else's, thanks to the SEC network and other advantages they have. The brutal part is building a winning program from scratch in the SEC is like, hey, I've never climbed a mountain, but I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this Everest thing. I'm going to try Everest. I've never climbed a mountain, but let's try this Everest thing. That's what building a program in the SEC is like. It's just brutal because everybody is so not good. Everyone's great. So Rob Vaughn has done a really good job. I don't think that there's been this much optimism behind Alabama baseball in a couple of decades. And they feel like, hey, this is 3 NCAA tournaments in a row, but we're only getting better. And in part, that's NIL. In part, it's revenue share, which is starting soon. And just the SEC being so good at everything right now. And obviously, money and facilities are a big part of all that.
All right, in case people don't know, and not to put a black eye on the situation, but we will bring it up. Rob Vaughn took over for Brian Bohannon, who probably just should have kept his mouth shut, but he was the manager. He's the coach of Alabama, who told somebody he was not starting his ace, and someone put $100,000 bet on it at the ballpark in Cincinnati, and that game got flagged. It was actually Alabama and LSU, and instead of somebody putting $5,000 on it, someone put $100,000 on it, and it got flagged. And Brian Bohannon lost what would have been the cushiest job he's ever going to have.
That's right, and the shame of it, there's so much weirdness around. For instance, Alabama was winning most of that season. They were on track to make the NCAA tournament. He's kind of helping bet against his own team when they're winning. Secondly, the game that the buddy bet all the money on, Alabama did lose that game, but boy, they came back. The tying runs were on base in the 9th inning. They almost came back and won that game anyway. So the team wasn't in on it because wasn't
that a Paul Skeens game?
As a matter of fact, it was. It was.
That's why the whole deal was. I'm not pitching my ace tonight. We didn't think it was because it was fixed. It was because the guy was banged up a little bit.
That ace who didn't pitch, who was banged up a little bit, would later transfer portal out to LSU. So there's just a bunch of weird stuff. But anyway,
Bohannon got the job. Yes.
That's how Vaughn got the job. Bohannon was immediately fired once Alabama was able to confirm what happened. And they finished the year with an interim coach who remains to this day Alabama's pitching coach. Vaughn retained him. They hired Rob Vaughn in the offseason. So this is his year 2. He did have to clean up a mess in terms of, I think the national perception of the program is pretty bad at that point when you have a coach betting against his own team or involved in that. I mean, that's a terrible scandal to be involved in. So it was a mess, but Alabama addressed it quickly, fired anyone that was remotely, hired experts, by the way, to look through all the games to see, is this something that's been happening? Have there been weird outcomes? But they couldn't find any real evidence of that. So really only Bohannon, lost his job over it. And but Rob Vaughn has been fantastic. I think Alabama fans are thrilled with him. The concern, Rob Vaughn's been so good, there's some level of concern that he could end up with the Mississippi State job or the Texas A&M job. I mean, that's the concern, is he's been so good, he could get plucked out, from Tuscaloosa. That's how much they like him. And I do think Alabama's going to do what it takes to keep him as much as they can.
Be careful what you wish for. First of all, it's Starkville, and that says all you need to say for. And if you're going to go to A&M, you're only doing it for the money because they don't win anything ever.
Yeah, he's got some tie over there. I'm not sure what it was. I think he might have grown up an A&M fan.
Like Bluebell ice cream, then I can't blame him.
Hey, I'm in.
He wins.
That's all it would take for me, Dave.
There you go. He's wearing the crimson, and he'd go to the maroon like that.
Well, if there's
Bluebell ice cream,
ice cream involved,
Jimmy. And again, I couldn't blame you. You'd be in the right. He is Jimmy Stein. He is a locked on Bama. Really appreciate it. It should be a heck of a regional. It is not easy for Southern Miss. You're hosting, but you got these nationally, recognized programs in Alabama and Miami. Kendall Rogers says Columbia is not easy. I may disagree with that, but he knows a lot more about it than I do. So it should be a heck of a regional. Really appreciate your time, Jimmy. Thank you so much.
Oh, really appreciate it, Dave. Thanks.